Hi, this is Mike Lytle. I'm with KKFI, and we're going to have an introductory lesson on how to work the board. So why don't we just dig right in, shall we? To start with, this is our board. It's in the production room. It's almost identical to the one in the main studio with a few minor variations. But for the introductory people, here's what I like to point out as some of the basics. The far left fader, marked mic 1, is your main microphone fader. What we do is we ramp up the volume up to about the gray line for normal talking over the microphone. Then we turn the microphone on. The red button means microphone on. When we turn it off, we pull the volume back down and then turn it off. I always recommend to do both steps to kind of help guarantee that their mic's turned off when you want it turned off. Again, up, then on, down, then off. We've also got mic 2, which works in the same fashion, which works the microphone on the other side of the monitor. We've also got 3 other buttons that work the CD players. CDs 1, 2, and 3 marked as such, and again with the same principle of going up to the gray line. Whenever we want the volume up and on, the CDs can be turned on from the board by hitting the button as such. Of course, when we turn it off, we can bring down and turn off. All 3 of these CDs should work starting from the board by hitting the red buttons. Now, we've also got the computer line hooked up in here for playback, but that's not really a needed tool for the introductory person working the board. But that's something to at least be aware of, that this is the computer playback line, which is hooked up to our computer screen for recording purposes. Our last button that's hooked up is our telephone line for the telephone interface for doing phone interviews here in this room. That's again something that's used by several of the people here at KKFI, but not really needed for the introductory person. But just to be aware of it, that's what that line is for. Other buttons that we use here on the production room board are the control room volume, marked CR. We like to keep that at a normal volume, straight up, or less, so that we don't have the volume go into the next room, into the main studio, and interrupt their performance in the other room. Headphone volume right here is utilized to have your headphones when hooked up to the headphone port down below. Most people don't use that headphone port, but again, if you bring in your own headphones, you can, as long as it's got the 1/4-inch jack, male jack adapter put on the end of the plug. Most of the people who come in here use the house headphones, and the house headphones are hooked up right here normally and can be used by anybody who comes in to use the board. There's a volume adapter on the side of it, on the plug, on the cord. So you're set right there for that. Now, as far as the microphone itself, several recommendations. One is, don't get too close to the microphone like this. Be back a good 6 inches from the microphone, and in a perfect world, have it set up to where it's off to the side so that you're not talking directly into it. You should be talking past it in a sense, but still have it there a good 6 inches away from your voice. Many times when you turn on the microphone and have the volume ramped up, you'll see here on the meter that your voice is somewhere in the neighborhood of the 0 mark. The bulk of the colors focus in on the 0 mark. That's our ideal volume, not only for talking into the microphone, but for anything that you might play on a CD. The single line that's up above is for peak volume, and we really don't pay attention to that. But the one that's around the 0 mark is the one that we like to keep it right about there, generally speaking. There's other things to also notice on the board. One is our clock. It's fairly accurate most of the time, but if indeed you're in here doing some sort of work, it's nice to at least know what time it is. We also got a timer in case you're timing something, and it can start from over here in this area. The green button starts the timer going, and of course, it stops the button. It stops the timer from going. And of course, we can reset it. Most people don't need it unless you're doing an interview with somebody over the telephone, because obviously most CDs have a timing device built into our CD player. Now let's move over to the CD players. All 3 of these units are turned on the far left. display screen off to the right. Well, these are the 3 units that are hooked up to the 3 faders that are here on the board. Each one of these units can be started from the board by opening a drawer. One can put a CD into the top, of course. You can close it by hitting the open close button, but I recommend trying to always close it by using the Q button. That saves wear and tear on the open close button. You change the tracks using this knob here, and each unit has either a choice for single play or continuous play for each particular CD that's put in using the play mode. You've also got a button that affects the time by having the songs either count up or count down. Most of the time when we're either in the main studio or in here, we recommend counting down so you always know how much time is left on your CD that's playing. The last thing I'd like to point out is the buttons up above the line of Q buttons right here. There are quite a few buttons that all say Q because each channel is identical to the other. The Q button is used in the other studio for when you want to sample some sort of recording, whether it be something in the computer or something off a CD, and you can sample it while you're listening to, or while there's something going out over the air. It's something that I can show at a further time, at a future time, but right now what we need to do is simply focus on the buttons up above here. In general, almost every button up above the Q line is not used by anybody in a training mode. If you're a new person here at KKFI, I'd recommend stay away from all of the buttons up above the Q line because they're not really useful for what you're doing. Now, one final thing I'd like to talk about is as you get involved in your training with KKFI, there are quite a few tips, I might say, that you can do while you're working on your introductory times, working on the board. One is practicing transitions, I call them. If you're actually doing a CD to CD transition, one can do that quite simply by having both volume levers up, the one that's playing, and then when that song is about to end, then you switch over to the next one you want to go to, and then let them actually cross over each other with the music playing simultaneously for just a few seconds while one comes in and the other fades out. Now, you can also do other transitions. The transition of my voice to music, from the music to my voice, to a spot in the computer, for example, when there is an underwriting spot being utilized. There are many transitions that one can practice, but what I tell all new people is anybody can talk into a microphone, anybody can play a CD. The trick is to learn how to do both at once, and the transitions is the easiest way to mentally get prepared so that you can figure out, hey, how easy is this going to be for me to do? And that's what I recommend is practicing transitions. And the final thought I'll have is, to give you, is when you're playing CDs and you're practicing in this room, don't play some 6-minute song. Don't play some 10-minute song in its entirety. You're practicing the transitions, remember, which means that you can cram a lot more practice into a short period of time if you simply play a minute or two of a song and then manually fade it down on the board and then practice the next transition, whether it be you talking or going to the next song. But I always recommend talking into the microphone as much as possible and getting used to feeling like this is a comfort zone for you because, let's face it, like I said, anybody can talk into a mic, anybody can play a CD, but practicing the transitions and actually simulating a radio show in here and doing it just like you'd do it if it was live, that's the best way to practice, in my opinion, so that you're trying to duplicate exactly what you might do if you were doing your own show. So with that final thought, I'll let you go. Thanks for listening in.